Hello, welcome to yet another class in Literature in English. In this class, we are going to be looking at one of the genres of literature, and that is prose. Now, in this class, we are going to wholly elaborate all the items and issues that are associated with this genre, ranging from its sub-classification to the narrative techniques and even the sub-genres as usual. So, sit tight and let us begin. Now, when we talk about the meaning of prose, we are simply saying that it is that genre of literature that conveys its sensibilities with all amount of simplicity of language. Now, it is very necessary for you to understand that one of the striking differences that exist between this genre of literature and its counterparts, I'm talking about drama and poetry, is that prose simply conveys its issues with all amount of simplicity of language, unlike drama and poetry. So let us begin by talking about the types of prose. There are three major sub-classifications of prose types. The first is fiction, the second is non-fiction, and most recently we have faction. Now let's begin with the first, fiction. Fiction is the form of prose that describes imaginary events and people. Now, just as the name implies, when we say that the content of any prose writing is fictitious in nature, we are simply saying that the story, the line of action, the characters, and even every other issue associated as regards the text does exist only in the mind of the writer. In this case, we can say that the work is fictitious. Therefore, the settings of such work, the characters, and every other associated elements to that work will always reveal that they do not exist in the real world, unlike it is in the mind of the writer. Now, the second type of, or the first rather, type of fiction is the novel. Now, the novel is a fictitious prose narrative of the book length, typically representing character and action with some degree of realism. Now, this type of fiction simply is one of the oldest forms of fiction in prose writing. We say that it is a fictitious narrative of a book length which is typically representing characters and action with an element of realism. Now, what this means is that even though the setting as well as the characters of a novel may be fictitious, the storyline may actually be drawn from realistic events in our society. The next subtype of fiction is the novella, also known as the novelette. The novella is a text of written fictional narrative prose, normally longer than a short story but shorter than a novel, somewhere between 17,500 and 40,000 words. Now, the major and striking difference between a novelette and a novel is in size. Even though the definitions of these two concepts may almost be the same, the striking difference between the two is in the size. So we can say that the novelette or the novella is in between the novel and the short story. What that means is that it is a bit longer than the short story and also a bit shorter than the novel, and it is around 17,500 and 40,000 words. The next subtype of fiction is the short story. This is a piece of prose fiction that typically can be read in one sitting and focuses on a self-contained incident or series of linked incidents with the intent of evoking a single effect. Now, it is very important for us to know that in a short story, all the characters as well as the elements that used in this type of prose work must be extremely very short. Now, one of the most important things that you should learn when reading a short story is that it should be in a linear or sequential arrangement. Now, all the structures that are associated with plots arrangement may not actually be applicable to the short story. Therefore, the characters, the settings, the language, as well as the content of the issues in a short story must be simplistic enough so that the reader can conclude everything and even summarize it in a sitting. That is why we say that in terms of length, the short story seems to be at the base after the novelette, before, of course, the novel. The next type of classification is the non-fiction. Now, non-fiction is exactly in opposition to the fiction aspect. This is a story in which its creator, in good faith, assumes responsibility for the truth or accuracy of the events, people, or information presented. Now, moving away from fiction to non-fiction, we say that when a prose text is non-fictitious, it simply means that the writer, in good faith, can assume responsibility that the message, including the characters or setting which he or she is presenting in the work, is to a very large extent a true account. Therefore, the messages and the contents of a non-fictitious text does not exist in the minds of the writer as it did in the fictitious category. Therefore, the messages and the content of a non-fiction text must always highly be true to the events in context. Now, let's begin to see the subtypes of non-fiction. The first type of non-fiction is the biography. So, biography is the comprehensive story of a person's life written by another person. A practical example is a work put forward by Ezenwa Ohaito and is titled Chinua Achebe, a writer, a friend. For sake of emphasis, Ezenwa Ohaito is the champion of pidgin poetry in Africa. Now, this work is written by Ezenwa Ohaito being a different person from the recipient of the work, and this type of non-fictitious text is referred to as a biography. The life account of person A written by another person is known as a biography. Another subclassification of non-fiction is autobiography. An autobiography is the comprehensive account of a person's life story written by his or herself. And a traceable illustration is in a work written by Chinua Achebe and is titled There Was a Country. Now, this work, There Was a Country, is a comprehensive account of the writer Chinua Achebe as documented by himself. It is very important that there are a whole lot of traceable illustrations of autobiography, of which, if we talk about Barack Obama's autobiography titled The Audacity of Hope, that can also make as another example. We can bring in Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela and a host of other examples. All these are autobiographical texts which captures the life account of the author himself, and of course it is documented by himself. Now, the next type of non-fiction is the memoir. The memoir is a historical account or biography written from personal knowledge. Its content covers specifically what the author is popularly known for. Now, it is very important to draw the thin line between a memoir and an autobiography. Now, it is very important to note yet again that the similarity that exists between a memoir and an autobiography is that both literary works are documented by the author himself about his life. But the striking difference is that whereas an autobiography carries a comprehensive account of which the writer covers, the memoir is only specific to talk about the issues of which the author is specifically known for. Therefore, the memoir is more specific about the author's life than the autobiography. A very practical example is a book put forward by Olusegun Obasanjo, the former president of Nigeria, and is titled My Command. Another one will be Nelson Effiong's memoir titled Nigeria and Biafra, My Story. For sake of emphasis, Nelson Effiong is the first vice president of the defunct Biafra, of which he was the one that handed over or surrendered the war to Nigeria at Doran Barracks on 15th January 1970. He had put up a very popular memoir titled Nigeria and Biafra, My Story, in order to concentrate on his knowledge and role as regards the 30-month war that occurred in Nigeria between the two factions. Now, it is also very important to trace My Command by Olusegun Obasanjo to a very popular autobiography put up by the same author and is titled My Watch. Now, a close juxtaposition between My Watch and My Command will reveal that My Watch seems to capture a comprehensive account of the author, Olusegun Obasanjo, but My Command specifically talks about the life of the author in the military. Therefore, like I had said, the memoir specifically talks about the lives of the author, of which he is known for, unlike the autobiography, which is more comprehensive. Now, let's look at the third sub-classification of prose, which is a more contemporary thing, and that is faction. Now, from the name faction, it is the blending of fiction and fact. Therefore, we read it as the faction in that context being a combination of fact and fiction is a prose story that has both elements of fiction and non-fiction. Therefore, the settings may be fiction while the content may be non-fiction. A very critical example of this type of work is a play written by Frank Obeche and is titled Harvest of Corruption. Now, a very close examination of these texts will reveal that there are some elements of truism and some other elements of non-true content in the work. In the truing aspect, we see clearly that there is the use of the currency of Nigeria, which is Naira. We can also see the use of Wazobia, which is a hybrid of Kam in the three major indigenous languages of Nigeria, of Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo. And then we can also see the use of some other aspects of truism, like the name Haladu Adeamaka, which is also a hybrid of the three major indigenous tribes. Haladu, of course, which hails from the northern part of the country. We talk about Ade, which is the Yorubas, which is the west, and then Amaka, which is the north. These are elements of truth and fact. But when we move to some elements of untrueness, we see Jakasa, we see elements of Jakasa, which is the general setting, of which we know such a place does not exist on the world map. So this type of work will always have a combination of true and non-true content. And in that case, you say that that work is known as faction, a combination of fiction and fact. Now, that's an element of what you have to learn. I enjoin you to look out for our subsequent video as we will be completing this part of the lessons. Thank you very much for watching.